I never thought Thanksgiving could break me. One moment, I was holding my son's hand, excited to finally feel like part of the family. The next, my parents stood at the door, faces cold, saying, "You're not welcome here." My little boy looked up at me, tears in his eyes, and whispered, "Mom, why don't they love us?" My heart shattered, but something inside me lit on fire. For 3 years, I had been the one paying their bills, keeping their lights on. That night, I realized, family can be the sharpest knife in your back. For 3 long years, my life had been a cycle of sacrifice. Every paycheck I earned, every bonus I received, seemed to vanish into the black hole of my parents' bills. Mortgage payments, overdue utilities, hospital visits. My money covered it all. I told myself this was what a good daughter did. I told myself that someday they would see me as the one who held the family together. But late at night, when I stared at my empty fridge and wondered how I would buy new shoes for my son, the loyalty I carried felt less like love and more like a chain around my neck. I remembered quitting a promising job offer in another state because my mother cried on the phone and said, "If you leave, who will take care of us? We'll fall apart without you." She said it in such a trembling voice that guilt gnawed at my chest. I stayed. I convinced myself that family came first, always. But while I was drowning in their demands, my sister was celebrated. On Facebook, my parents constantly posted pictures of her, praising her as their rock, their angel who never left their side. I would stare at those posts in disbelief. I was the one paying their hospital bills. I was the one rushing over in the middle of the night when my father had chest pains. Yet to the world, she was the saint, and I was invisible. Every time I asked about it, my mother would say, "You're too sensitive. We just want to make her feel included." Gaslighting, subtle but sharp, chipped away at my confidence. I thought if I worked harder, gave more, they would finally acknowledge me. But deep inside, a quiet whisper told me something was wrong. Still, I pushed that voice aside. I cooked for them, babysat my sister's kids when she wanted to travel, and covered expenses she refused to take responsibility for. I even loaned her money I never got back. My son once asked why his aunt had new clothes every season while he wore hand-me-downs. I smiled and said, "Because she has different priorities." The truth was uglier. She had me. I remember the night my best friend Emily tried to intervene. She sat across from me, watching me sigh over another late-night transfer to my parents' bank account. "Rachel," she said firmly, "this isn't normal. Families are supposed to support each other. They're not supposed to drain you until you're empty." I laughed nervously. "You don't understand. They need me." Her eyes softened. "No, they want to control you. There's a difference." I brushed her words aside, convincing myself she didn't get it. But her warning lingered in the back of my mind like a faint echo. The red flags multiplied, but I ignored them. When I said no to a request, my father snapped, "Without us, you wouldn't even exist. Don't forget who gave you life." When I hesitated about giving money, my mother wept. "You don't love us anymore. We sacrificed everything for you." My sister, smirking on the sidelines, never missed a chance to remind me that I owed them. The guilt worked like poison, seeping into every corner of my decisions. I told myself over and over that this was love, that I was just being loyal. But I was blind, trapped in a pattern I couldn't see clearly. The night before Thanksgiving, I was scrolling through my phone when I stumbled across another post my mother had shared. A photo of my sister holding a glass of wine at their dining table captioned, "Our pride, our heart, the daughter who never lets us down." My chest tightened. The table was already set, the house decorated, and I realized something chilling. I hadn't been asked to bring anything, hadn't even been mentioned in their plans. I swallowed the sting of exclusion, convincing myself it was an oversight. "It's fine," I whispered to myself. "Tomorrow will be different. They'll be happy to see me." But a small knot of dread curled inside me, one I tried desperately to ignore. I went to bed telling myself family was worth the pain. I clung to the belief that loyalty would be enough to earn love. And I had no idea that while I was imagining laughter and togetherness, my parents and sister were finalizing a plan to humiliate me in front of everyone. I thought I was being a good daughter. I thought I was keeping us all together. But the truth was simple. They weren't planning to welcome me at all. And when the door slammed in my face the next day, I would realize my role in their story was already written. The next morning, I dressed my son in his best shirt, the one with tiny blue buttons he loved. He was excited, humming in the back seat, asking what kind of pie Grandma had baked this year. I forced a smile, gripping the steering wheel tighter than I should have. My stomach churned with unease, but I told myself it was just nerves. Thanksgiving was supposed to be about family, gratitude, and warmth. Surely, after all I had done for them, they would open the door with love. When I pulled into the driveway, I noticed several cars already parked out front. Laughter spilled out from the house, muffled by the closed door. My son squeezed my hand, his face glowing with anticipation. Together we walked up the steps, my heart pounding louder with every knock I gave. The door opened. My mother stood there, her expression flat, cold, like I was nothing more than a stranger at her doorstep. My father hovered behind her, avoiding my eyes. Then, from the living room, my sister's voice rang out. "Tell her she's not welcome." I froze, waiting for someone to laugh, to say it was a cruel joke. But my mother's voice cut through like glass. "You can't come in, Rachel. Your sister doesn't want to see you here. We won't ruin the evening by making her uncomfortable." For a moment, the world tilted. My son's small fingers clutched mine, trembling. His eyes widened in confusion. "Mom, why don't they love us?" The question shattered me, echoing louder than any insult could. Before I could respond, I noticed movement. Neighbors across the street had paused, staring. A couple of younger cousins pulled out their phones, filming the scene. And then, unbelievably, one of them live-streamed it. Within minutes, strangers were commenting online, mocking me with captions, "When your family kicks you out of Thanksgiving." The humiliation spread faster than I could breathe. I stood there begging silently for some ounce of mercy, but my parents just closed the door, leaving me and my son on the porch. I carried him back to the car, my body shaking, shame burning my face. That was the night my heart cracked, but I didn't know then. It was only the first blow. Driving home. The silence in the car felt suffocating. My son leaned against me, confused, whispering, "Did we do something bad?" I fought back tears. "No, sweetheart, we didn't." But inside, I questioned everything. Was I really so unworthy to them? Hours later, I scrolled through social media, and my stomach dropped. The live stream had gone viral on TikTok. Thousands of people I didn't even know watched me being turned away like trash. Some laughed, some pitied, but the comments all pierced the same wound. If your family rejects you, maybe it's you. As if things couldn't get worse. That weekend, I discovered something that turned humiliation into betrayal. A relative, perhaps out of guilt, sent me screenshots of a family group chat, the one I had been excluded from for years. In it, my parents discussed their estate plans. My sister was the sole heir. Everything, house, savings, investments, was going to her. My name wasn't even mentioned. The relative's message stung more than the words themselves. You were cut out a long time ago. They only keep you around to cover their bills. You've been paying to stay useful. My hands shook as I read it over and over. Memories flooded back. My mother's midnight calls for money. My father's guilt trips. My sister's smug smiles. Suddenly, every sacrifice I had made twisted into proof of my own blindness. I thought about Emily, my best friend, warning me, this isn't normal. She had been right all along. I just refused to see it. That night, I sat in the dark, staring at my son asleep beside me. The realization crept in slowly, chilling and undeniable. My family wasn't my safe place. They weren't my anchor. They were predators, and I had been their prey. For the first time in my life, a horrifying thought took root. Maybe the greatest enemy I had ever known wasn't out in the world. Maybe it was sitting at my family's dinner table, carving turkey, pretending to be saints. And as the truth sank deeper, I understood something else. I could never go back to being blind again. The humiliation of Thanksgiving had left a scar, but it also lit something inside me that I could no longer ignore. If my family had already cast me out, I had nothing left to lose. The only thing I could do now was fight back. But not with screaming or fists. I needed something stronger, proof. The first step was to gather everything I had given them. I sat at my kitchen table, stacks of bills and receipts spread around me like broken pieces of a puzzle. Electric bills with my name on the payment slips, hospital invoices marked paid, mortgage statements showing my transfers. Each document told the same story. I was the one keeping my parents afloat, while they pretended my sister was the dutiful child. But I knew paperwork alone wouldn't be enough. They would deny it, twist it, make me seem unstable. So I started recording. Every phone call from my mother that began with "Rachel, we need," ended with me quietly saving the file. Each sigh, each guilt-drenched word, evidence. Then came the night that changed everything. As I sifted through old folders on my father's desk, ones I had once been asked to organize for him, I noticed bank statements I hadn't seen before. My breath caught as I read them. Large withdrawals had been made from a family fund, signed under my name. But I had never touched that account. The signature scrawled across those papers was supposed to be mine. But it wasn't. My sister had forged it, siphoning money for herself. Rage flooded me, but so did clarity. This wasn't just neglect or favoritism. It was fraud. It was theft. I had the evidence now, but I also had a new fear. If I exposed it too soon, without the right preparation, they would crush me. They had the reputation, the numbers, and the manipulation tactics. I had the truth, but truth alone doesn't win wars. I whispered to myself as I tucked the forged documents into a folder. I have the proof, but if I release it too early, they'll destroy me. I needed allies. I contacted a lawyer recommended by a colleague, a sharp woman who specialized in family financial disputes. When I slid the folder of receipts, recordings, and forged documents across her desk, she looked me straight in the eye and said, "Rachel, you've been exploited, but now you have leverage." For the first time in months, I felt a flicker of hope. Next, I began therapy. Sitting in that quiet room with a stranger gently asking me why I felt responsible for people who clearly didn't love me, the weight I carried finally cracked. One session in, I found myself sobbing uncontrollably, admitting out loud the words I had buried for years. They don't love me. They love what I do for them. The therapist didn't flinch. She simply handed me tissues and said, "That realization is painful, but it's also your freedom." For once, my tears weren't weakness. They were release. Then came an unexpected ally, my Aunt Linda. She was always on the periphery of family events, quiet but observant. One evening, she called me. "Rachel," she said, "I've seen how they treat you. I have documents you should see." She provided copies of emails, messages, and even receipts where my sister had bragged about tricking Rachel into paying again. But not everyone I reached out to was trustworthy. A cousin I confided in betrayed me, running back to my sister with everything I had said. Within days, my parents called, their tone dripping with false concern. "We heard you're planning something. Rachel, don't do anything foolish. Families forgive and forget." My stomach dropped. They knew. I had almost exposed myself too soon. From that moment on, I spoke carefully, trusting fewer people, making sure every step was airtight. The betrayal cut deep, but it taught me a lesson. I couldn't rely on blood, only on those who had proven themselves with action. One night after therapy, exhausted from holding everything together, I let myself collapse into tears again. My son was asleep in the next room, and I sat in the dark, clutching my folder of evidence, whispering to the silence, "I can't do this. I'm not strong enough." But then I remembered the look on his face when we were turned away from the house, the confusion in his eyes, the shame he carried because of me, and suddenly I realized this fight wasn't just mine. It was for him too. They thought they had broken me. They thought humiliation would silence me, that betrayal would crush me. But they were wrong, because I wasn't going to fight like the daughter they had controlled. I was going to fight like the strategist they had accidentally created. They believed I would crumble. But what they didn't know was that this was the moment I was learning how to rise. Christmas Eve arrived, wrapped in glittering lights and false cheer. My parents' house glowed on the corner of the street, filled with warmth that I knew wasn't meant for me. But this time, I wasn't walking toward the door hoping for an embrace. I had planned my moment with precision. As the family gathered inside, glasses clinking, carols humming in the background, I pressed send. Within seconds, every inbox belonging to my extended family received the same message. Years of bank transfers, scanned receipts, copies of forged signatures, all laid out in black and white. My heart pounded as I imagined their phones buzzing in unison, but that wasn't all. With help from my lawyer, I had arranged for a slideshow of transactions to play on a screen at the party. My cousin, secretly on my side, connected the projector while everyone laughed over dessert. Suddenly, the laughter froze. Numbers, dates, account details filled the wall behind the Christmas tree, casting shadows that no twinkling light could hide. Gasps rippled through the room. My aunt clutched her chest. An uncle leaned closer, squinting, whispering, "These are Rachel's transfers. Thousands of dollars." The final blow came when I released the audio file. My sister's voice, cruel and dripping with arrogance, filled the room. "Just let her keep paying. She's too stupid to stop. The house will be mine anyway." Her laugh echoed through the stunned silence. For a moment, I thought I had done it. I thought the truth, sharp and undeniable, it would end it all. But my parents were quicker than I imagined. My mother stood, her face twisting in fury. "This is manipulation. Rachel doctored these documents. She's trying to ruin our family's holiday with lies." My father added, "She's unstable. She's always been jealous of her sister." My sister, eyes blazing, pointed at the screen. "She forged those herself. Don't believe her. She's desperate for attention." Their voices collided in a storm of denial, anger, and accusation. For a terrifying second, I felt the old weakness creep back in, the doubt, the guilt. What if they turned everyone against me again? What if the truth wasn't enough? Then I remembered the folder in my bag, the originals, notarized and authenticated by the bank. Slowly, with hands steadier than I expected, I pulled them out. I walked forward, placing the documents into my uncle's hands, into my aunt's, letting each page travel from person to person. "This isn't my word against theirs," I said, my voice trembling but unbroken. "These are verified records. This is the truth they never wanted you to see." The room shifted. My parents' denials faltered. My sister's face drained of color as her forged signatures were compared to my real ones. A hush fell over the crowd, heavy and condemning. And then, like a dam breaking, the questions began. "Is this true? Why would you lie? Rachel's been supporting you all this time?" Each word was another crack in their armor. I stood there, my son clinging to my side, his small hand gripping mine. For all the strength I projected, inside I was shaking. My body ached from the weight of years of manipulation. My knees threatened to buckle. And yet I held on, not because I felt invincible, but because I finally understood vulnerability didn't make me weak. It made me human. I knelt, pressing my forehead against my son's hair. For one quiet moment, the noise of the room faded, and it was just us. I whispered, "It's okay now. They can't hurt us anymore." Tears burned my eyes, but they weren't only from pain, they were from release. Behind me, chaos erupted. My parents shouted, my sister wailed, trying desperately to claw back their image. But the evidence was already in everyone's hands, undeniable, unshakable. The same relatives who once looked past my exhaustion now stared at me with new understanding. I thought exposing them was the end game, the final strike. But as I looked around the room, at the fury in my parents' eyes, at the desperation in my sister's voice, I realized the war wasn't over. This was only the beginning of their downfall. They would fight back. They would smear my name, claw for sympathy, try to twist reality again. I thought tonight would close the chapter, but in truth, it only opened the door to something far bigger. Justice was coming, and this time it wouldn't stop halfway. The weeks after Christmas were a blur of silence broken by sudden storms. My parents stopped calling, my sister vanished from social media, and yet their shadows lingered in every corner of my thoughts. I thought they would try to bury the truth quietly, but instead, their world began to unravel in public view. The first blow came when the bank responded to my lawyer's filings. The account my sister had drained, the forged documents, every detail was confirmed. Within days, their assets were frozen pending investigation. My parents, who had once boasted about their financial security, now whispered nervously about overdue bills. For the first time, they were the ones worrying about survival. My sister's fall was faster, sharper. Word spread at her workplace about the investigation, about the recordings. Her polished image as the dutiful daughter crumbled overnight. Colleagues stopped answering her calls, and eventually she was quietly dismissed. The woman who once strutted like a queen now scrambled in panic, stripped of her crown. But the real twist came when strangers reached out to me. A woman from my sister's old university messaged me, saying she had once been conned by her into borrowing scholarship funds. A former friend admitted she had lost thousands in a fake investment my sister had orchestrated. One by one, voices arose, stories of betrayal stacking higher until the pattern was undeniable. My sister wasn't just cruel to me. She had been a predator for years. My lawyer connected the dots, weaving these accounts into something bigger than a family dispute. Suddenly, it wasn't just about me being excluded from Thanksgiving. It was about fraud, deceit, exploitation that spanned years and touched many lives. The case grew beyond my imagination, attracting legal authorities and reporters who wanted the full story. Watching her world collapse should have filled me with satisfaction. And yes, a part of me rejoiced at seeing the manipulators finally taste the consequences of their cruelty. But as I stood in the middle of it all, I realized revenge was not the destination. Justice was, and justice felt different. It was quieter, steadier, heavier. It wasn't about seeing them suffer. It was about watching the truth stand taller than their lies. I walked through the chaos with a strange calm, knowing I no longer had to shout to be heard. The evidence spoke for me. The witnesses spoke for me. Their own actions spoke louder than anything I could ever say. And yet, as powerful as that was, it didn't erase the years of scars. Revenge gave me a victory, but justice gave me clarity. And clarity made me realize winning against them was only half the battle. The other half was reclaiming myself. Newspapers picked up my story, framing it as a tale of resilience. Headlines read, "Daughter exposes family betrayal. 3 years of financial sacrifice revealed." Then I became a symbol in ways I had never asked for. Strangers applauded me for my courage, but when I walked down the street, I didn't feel like a hero. I felt like a survivor still learning how to breathe freely. So I took my son to the park. We sat under a sky that seemed wider than it had in years. He laughed as he ran through the grass, his voice carrying into the open air. I closed my eyes listening. For once, there were no phone calls demanding money, no whispers of betrayal, no guilt gnawing at my conscience, just the sound of my boy's laughter, pure and untainted. That moment was my liberation. Not the freezing of accounts, not the headlines, not even my sister's downfall. Liberation was knowing my son could grow up without inheriting the chains I had carried for so long. Liberation was realizing I had broken the cycle. Still, even in peace, the truth lingered. My past was shattered, the family I once clung to destroyed by their own greed. And though the victory was real, it left a quiet emptiness in its place. I looked at my son chasing the wind and whispered, more to myself than to him, "This is just the beginning. We have to build something new now. Because revenge ends with destruction, but freedom begins with creation." And I knew deep down that as the old house of lies crumbled, it was my responsibility to lay the first brick of the life we deserved. The silence that followed the storm was different this time. It wasn't the suffocating silence of abandonment, nor the anxious quiet of waiting for the next demand. It was a silence I chose, a silence carved by boundaries that no one would cross again. I blocked my parents' numbers, deleted their emails, and cut the invisible cords that had tied me to their control for decades. At first, it felt unnatural. For so long, I had been trained to respond to every call, to anticipate every crisis. But the longer I resisted, the lighter I became. No contact was more than just ignoring them. It was reclaiming the space in my mind they had occupied for years. The test came sooner than I expected. One evening, as I prepared dinner for my son, an unknown number flashed on my phone. Against my better judgment, I answered. My sister's voice, once dripping with arrogance, now shook with desperation. "Rachel, please. I made mistakes. I'm ruined. The debts, the job, everything's gone. I just need your help." Her words were different, but the manipulation beneath them felt the same. For a moment, my chest tightened, the old instinct to rescue tugging at me. But then I looked at my son, busy setting the table with clumsy little hands, and I remembered what it had cost me every time I gave in. "I forgive you," I said slowly, surprising even myself. But forgiveness doesn't mean access. Before she could respond, I ended the call. My hands trembled, but not from fear. It was power. That night, I sat alone with my journal, writing the words over and over. Forgiveness doesn't mean access. Each stroke of the pen felt like drawing a line in stone, one that could never be erased. As the months passed, the space they left behind began to fill with something new. I poured my energy into my career, building the small consulting business I had once abandoned for them. Without their constant demands draining me, my finances grew steadily. For the first time, I wasn't surviving paycheck to paycheck. I was thriving. Then came an invitation I never expected. A nonprofit organization reached out, asking if I would speak about my story at an event on resilience. I hesitated at first. The thought of standing on a stage, exposing my scars to strangers, felt terrifying. But then I remembered the countless nights I had sat alone, believing I was the only one enduring a toxic family. If my story could reach even one person like me, it was worth it. The event turned into more than just a speech. It was a turning point. Soon after, I was invited to deliver a TED Talk. Standing under the bright lights, I told the world about betrayal at the hands of family, about the cost of blind loyalty, and about the power of boundaries. When I finished, the audience rose to their feet. The applause wasn't just for my words, it was for survival, for truth. for every person who had ever felt alone in the shadows of their own blood. Afterward, women approached me in tears. "Your story is my story," one whispered. Another held my hand and said, "You made me believe I can leave too." In their faces, I saw reflections of my own pain, but also the spark of hope that had once been buried deep inside me. I was no longer alone. That realization was the final twist, the one I never saw coming. All the years I had spent drowning in silence, thinking I was the only one, had blinded me to the fact that an entire community of survivors existed, waiting for connection. By stepping into the light, I found them, and together we were stronger than any manipulation, stronger than any betrayal. Life with my son became brighter, fuller. We shared quiet dinners without fear of interruption, laughed in parks without guilt, dreamed about futures that were truly ours. I stopped mourning the family I had lost, because in truth, they had never been the family I needed. Instead, I started building a chosen family, a circle of friends, allies, and survivors who understood loyalty without chains. As I tucked my son into bed one night, he looked up at me with sleepy eyes and asked, "Mom, do we have a family now?" I kissed his forehead and smiled. "Yes, baby, we do. And this time it's one we chose." They threw me out of their dinner, but I built my own table, and this time my son and I will never be uninvited again.